Hey everyone, it's Michael here from Replica Airguns with another sort of tabletop review slash comparison. Today we're looking at the Umarex Glocks. And what I'm going to attempt to do here is show you the differences between these guns. And these are the differences kind of between the Gen 3 versus the Gen 4. I want to go over some of the visual differences between the Gen 3 and the Gen 4. We have 3 blowback versions with different variations of blowback. We also have a non-blowback BB gun here as well, and they all have different types of magazines. So we're going to kind of go through all that, and I'll talk about feet per second, we'll talk about weights, we'll talk about double action versus single action triggers, all of that kind of stuff. So first of all, what do we have here? Well, we have the Umarex Glock 19, and this is basically a Gen 3, okay? So Glock 19 Gen 3, and that's a non-blowback, but we'll get more into that. Along the top, we also have another Gen 3, and this is the Glock 17 Gen 3. This is a blowback BB gun. I'm going to call it a partial blowback BB gun. We'll get more into that as well. Full-size dropout mag, stick mag here. Basically, down here, we have kind of a hybrid gun. This is the Glock 19X. It's kind of a mix between the 19 and the 17 Gen 4, basically. So we have the 17 Gen 4, 17 Gen 4 frames on the bottom. We have Gen 3 frames more or less on the top, okay? And this gun mechanically is very similar to this gun, okay? Because the frames, even though they're a little bit different, they have similar magazines. They're both semi-blowback action, okay? You can even mix and match the magazines for these two guns. But in reality, this has a Glock 19 sort of slide on it with a Glock 17 Gen 4 frame for the most part. Lastly, we have the Glock 17 Gen 4. And this is a full blowback gun with a slightly different magazine. All three of these guns have full-size magazines, but they are different. I'll show you that. And again, we have Gen 4 frames, Gen 3 frames, non-blowback, partial blowback, full blowback. Let's get into specs. Okay, with the non-blowback, we have a 16-round stick magazine. I'll show you it all later. We have a 410 FPS rating on it. I got about 423. Now keep in mind, temperatures were a little bit different with all these guns, but they pretty much all got about, or really close to the claimed FPS. The Glock 19 comes in at 1.6 pounds, 726 grams, and has basically a double action only trigger. It's probably the most CO2 efficient gun here because it's non-blowback. Now I'll just jump down to the Glock 19X because it's next on my list here. And it's kind of, like I said, a hybrid 17/19. And it's a partial blowback BB gun. I'll show you that in a bit. It has an 18-round full-size dropout magazine, same as this one. They're pretty much the same magazines. Umarex claims 360 FPS, and I pretty much got right about that when I did my chronograph. Weighs a little bit lighter. It's at 1.5 pounds with 662 grams, and I would call a double action only trigger, even though when the slide moves back and forward, it does kind of preload the internal hammer, but the trigger still feels more like a double action trigger because it's longer and you are actually sort of manipulating parts on the magazine that does cause a little more friction, makes it more feel like a double action trigger. Both of these do that, okay? Now both the Glock 17 Gen 3 and the Glock 19X have pretty good CO2 efficiency because they have that partial blowback action, and the way the magazine seals with the barrel does also allow for a little bit more efficiency, and I'll kind of show you that again as well. All right, moving on to the Glock 17 Gen 3. Again, it's partial blowback. It has the same 18-round full-size dropout metal magazine as the 19X. Umarex claims 365 FPS with an average that I got was 363. And it wasn't even that warm when I tested it, so easily going to get about 365 or maybe even more on a warmer day. We're looking at 1.6 pounds or 726 grams. Double action trigger, again, it's kind of single/double, but I'm going to go with more of a double action trigger feel because of what's going on in the gun. And again, about the same CO2 efficiency because they do use the same magazines with the same valves and the same mechanical internal mechanisms. All right, last but not least, we have our Glock 17 Gen 4. Let's go over the specs. It is a full blowback operation. I'm going to show you that, so don't worry, it's not just all me talking. 18-round full-size dropout metal magazine, 320 FPS claimed. I got 310. Again, depends on the temperature. It just depends on a lot of things. The Glock 17 Gen 4 weighs in at 1.7 pounds or 771 grams. The Glock 17 Gen 4 does have a true single action only trigger because of the full blowback action and the fact that the trigger kind of resets a little further back and it's quite short and quite light, just like you would expect a single action trigger to be. I'm going to say this is the most realistic in terms of blowback, function, operation. It's very similar to how most airsoft or blowback airsoft guns are built. And the Glock 17 Gen 4 is going to probably be the least efficient on CO2 because it's just not made for efficiency. It's made more for realism. You get that full blowback operation, full-size dropout metal magazine. You do lose a little bit of gas, but you gain more blowback action again. I do want to mention the similarities before I start getting more hands-on with these guys. They're all Glock licensed via Umarex. They all have working trigger safeties one way or another. They all have white dot sights, and they all have accessory rails built in. Okay, so what are some of the differences? Let's look at the magazines first, because that's kind of a, an indicator of what's a little bit different. We pull these guys out. Okay, so you can see them all. So as you can see, we have the stick magazine here, right? It's your standard stick magazine. The CO2 is actually inside the gun. So it's right here. You put it in the back, right? Inside, and then you have basically a tool that's built in. Let me show you there. There's a tool built in. It's right there. That's your Allen key that you can tighten it up with. Okay. And then we'll just keep moving sort of left to right, right to left, whatever. Here we have a full-size magazine, but you'll notice that part of it is kind of like, it's like a two-tone. I think it's all metal, but it's like it's got this could be plastic, I'm not entirely sure, but it weighs a fair bit. It's probably all metal. It just has this little guy here that I want to show you. Okay, so when the trigger moves, it's moving this, basically when you pull the trigger, it moves this little inner barrel into the breech of the gun that helps seal things up, but that does cause that friction, and it does make the trigger feel more like a double action only trigger. Of course, you load your BBs in there. Okay, magazine on here is identical. They fit in either gun. Okay, so this is the same magazine. All right, and then we have the full blowback magazine, right? So you load your BBs there. You have your CO2 that goes in the bottom. I'm not going to do it, but basically there's a screw there, an opening for the CO2, and you can screw it in. You do need an Allen key with this one. You do need an Allen key with this one as well. Okay, so this is more like, looks more like a traditional magazine versus this, right? But they are full-size dropout metal magazines, so it does kind of, if you're going to be shooting and practicing, they'll work similarly in terms of reloading, okay? All right, let's talk about the blowback or non-blowback in some case issues here. So here we have no blowback, fixed slide, doesn't move at all, okay? And then we have the Glock 17 Gen 3. See how the blowback isn't that far, but it does have blowback action, okay? I'm gonna show you this trigger, right? So it's a little heavier if I pull it like that. It doesn't reset, but you'll notice there's less. This is when basically what's happening is it's moving that little inner part from the magazine forward, okay? So, but it doesn't release until you get there. So here I've got like a lot more friction, so I could shoot literally double action, true double action, cock it, and then I have, see how heavy that is? Totally free floating, and then, okay? So this one's gonna be the same mechanism, exactly the same. And then we have this guy here. And so if I pull it back, see how far back that goes? That's full blowback action. The slide also locks back a lot further back than the other guns, than the semi blowback action or partials. Watch this trigger, right? Completely different. So here the reset. Okay, really nice, true single action trigger. Very nice, okay? Now in terms of the trigger safeties, they do all work. So I can't pull this back unless I have my finger on the trigger safety. Same with this one. It's kind of weird how it works, but it does work. It's working. It's more forgiving, let's put it that way. Okay, but that works. Same with this one, right? If I pull it like that without engaging the trigger safety, it's not going to work. As soon as you use the trigger safety, it does work. Now you notice on all of these guns, they're a little bit different in some ways. Now one thing that's different, they do look a little different. So we have more of the Gen 3 frames here, and they do have different finger grips, right? Obviously they're quite different. For the Gen 4, now this is like a weird sort of combination of a bunch of guns, but it has a different frame on it. It has different finger grips than the two up there. This is the more traditional Gen 4 finger grips. You're going to notice the magazine releases are a little bit bigger on the Gen 4s versus the small one on the Gen 3s. Pull that down a little bit. So the Gen 3s have a smaller magazine release, you know, maybe a little harder to find, harder to get to, a little larger on the Gen 4s, okay? The actual slide catch release is a little bit different on the Gen 4. Okay, it's got a little bit more of a notch there versus on the Gen 3, right? A little bit different, but similar. Again, all of them are gonna have some form of white dot sight on them, right? Front and back, which is nice, okay? And they all have the rails on the fronts, right? Bottom part, front part of the frame. And to be honest, that's pretty much all of the differences, right? So if you want an on-blowback gun, a little bit less expensive version, go with the Glock 19. Stick mag works perfectly well, shoots well, has the highest FPS, most CO2 efficient. Basically, these two are going to perform relatively the same. They just look a little different. You know, they're pretty much bang on in terms of performance and mechanism, how they mechanically work. Everything's pretty much the same. So basically choose which one you like the look of the most when you're looking at these two. They're going to be pretty CO2 efficient. They're going to offer blowback operation, which gives you that simulated recoil. So if you like the blowback, it's pretty good that way. A little bit faster FPS than the full blowback, somewhere between these two, right? So kind of a nice compromise. If you want realism, ultimate realism, then go with the Gen 4, the Glock 17 here. It's going to have full blowback operation. It's going to be the most realistic looking, operation-wise the most realistic, trigger feel most realistic, but you will sacrifice some CO2 and some power. All right, thanks for watching another Replica Airguns video. Don't forget to subscribe. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Username is Replica Airguns. If you're interested in buying any of these guns, check out our Canadian and US online stores over at replicaairguns.ca and replicaairguns.us. I'll be putting links to buy these guns in the description of this video and over on our website, where the written post will be over at replicaairguns.com, where I have articles, posts, reviews, and additional photos. We also sell other products in our Canada and US stores. We sell air guns, BB guns, airsoft guns, pellet guns, blank guns, and other accessories. All right, thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.